In which war did you serve, Jim?
World War II.
And what branch of the service?
Navy.
Do you recall your highest rank?
Yes, I was an aviation radioman first class.
And in which locations did you serve when you were in?
In the Pacific, various places.
Okay, and we'll go through those. So Jim, how did you get in the service? Were you drafted or did you enlist?
No, I enlisted.
Can you tell me how that happened and when it was and where you were living?
At the time I was living in the Elmwood section of West Hartford. I guess, I remember some details that you'll find in that write-up there that my brother and I decided on December 7th that we would both avoid going into the service and stay home and protect our family, which we subsequently found out didn't have to be done. So my brother went off with the Hartford Hornets, and
What are the Hartford Hornets?
they were a group of pilots.
Air Force? Well, the Army Air Corps at the time?
I think they were Navy.
Oh. Your brother was older or younger?
Older.
So he was the first to leave?
No, we left at the same time, but we agreed to stay home in the first place to defend the family.
And then you both left?
Yeah, then we both left.
So he went with the Hartford Hornets, and where did you go?
I just went into the Navy, and
Why did you choose the Navy?
well, again, I think it says in there, but I decided that was kind of remote, and I could serve maybe in the Atlantic Ocean, not too far from home, and so forth, or maybe even on Long Island Sound. But as it turned out, I wound up going to radio school and then learning the.
How soon after Pearl Harbor did you and your brother leave?
I think it was probably late that next year, 1942.
Do you recall where you were when Pearl Harbor was hit?
Yeah, I was in the center of Elmwood. Again, it tells in that write-up. I was on the corner of Grove Street and New Britain Avenue, standing around with a bunch of other guys and listening to this incredible thing over the radio.
Who had a radio?
Somebody had a portable radio.
So you were just hanging out with guys? What was your reaction?
Well, I was kind of shocked. I went home immediately to listen on the old Atwater Kent radio. And it was a wild kind of day. I don't remember, like I say, I think my brother and I agreed we would stay home to defend the family, but then we realized that didn't have to happen.
Where did you go to enlist in the Navy? Did you have to go into Hartford?
I went to New Haven. I tried to enlist in the Coast Guard, which was, they were down on Prospect Street, but I was colorblind, and or 85% colorblind, and they immediately bounced me out didn't want me. So then I took a train down to New Haven where the Navy stuff was and joined in the Navy.
Once you enlisted in the Navy, how soon did you leave for basic training?
Oh, probably just a couple of days, 2 or 3 days.
Oh, what was your mother's reaction?
Tell you the truth, I don't remember much of that.
Where did you go for basic training?
Newport, Rhode Island.
Can you describe to me what that was like? What did you do there? How long was it?
I don't know. It was several weeks. We again, this is all covered in that write-up, but I remember running around at night in the cold just to keep exercised or something. There again, that's in that write-up. Then I got to choose a school, so I chose aviation radio school.
Why did you choose that? Did you have any experience with that?
No, I wanted to fly, but I realized that I couldn't fly, so the next thing was to maybe instead of piloting a plane, go along in one, and as a radioman. So that's what I chose radio school for.
Did you do your radio school at Newport, Rhode Island also?
No, I went to Jacksonville, Florida for that.
Do you recall how long that was?
No, I don't. It may, again, as I say, tell it in that write-up. But I went from there to California.
When you were in Jacksonville, do you recall what radio they trained you on?
No, I have no idea.
So after your radio training in Jacksonville, you went to California for how long?
Maybe a couple of weeks or something.
And what did you do there?
We learned a little bit about aerial gunnery. Went out to a place called Lake Chabot. And again, as you find in that write-up, Robert Stack was our instructor.
Really? The
Yeah.
movie star?
Yeah. Yeah. And he was real good.
Do you remember any of your other instructors?
No, not really.
After your aerial gunnery training, where did you go?
I think that's when we shipped out to the Pacific.
So did you have a chance to go home to see your family and have any leave before you left, or did you directly ship out?
No.
So you shipped right out of California. Where did you go?
Oh, to various places in the Pacific.
Do you recall what order? What was the first place you went to?
Again, I worked hard trying to remember some of these answers to some of these questions that you'll find in there.
And
But
we'll attach your record of your memoir to
okay,
your collection, so all of that will be in there.
yeah.
Can you recall now when you left California where the first place was?
No, I can't. Again, as I say, it's probably in there. we
What's
went.
the first place you can remember?
Again, there were so many that we were on our way out to Pearl Harbor. That we went there first, and then on to the South Pacific from there.
When you did arrive at Pearl Harbor, did you see the damage? Was it still visible, the damage that had been done from the bombing?
Only a little bit of it. One ship, I think, was there that was pretty well battered.
When you left California, were you assigned to your ship at that point?
No.
So you weren't on the Curtis yet?
No.
Did you stay for any length of time at Pearl, or just stopped over and kept going?
We just stopped over and kept going. I remember walking or running around the place to see what it was like, you know. But again, that's all of that stuff is in there, all the recollections. I worked hard to try to remember that, and that was too many years after I should have written that while I was doing it. But I sat around and thought a lot about the things that I bring up in there. But
when did you get assigned to the Curtis?
I'm not sure. But that was apparently where I shipped out to from California. I think I went directly to the Curtis after hopping islands and all that stuff.
So then before you actually got on the Curtis and got your assignment as radio man, were you responsible for being a radio operator on the ship that you were sailing on?
No.
What were your responsibilities? Did you have any?
Didn't have any.
So you just had to...
Just being transported out to...
So your responsibility started once you got on the USS Curtis?
Yep.
You don't recall where or when that was, do you?
No, I have no idea.
So once you did get aboard the USS Curtis, what can you tell me about that ship?
Well, it was I was assigned to the Radio Shack, which was way up in the front and up high. Again, all that is in that thing. But being aboard ship was kind of funny because we slept on racks that were pulled down from the side of the walls of the passageways where we were, and they were 4 or 5 high, I guess.
Oh.
And so you had to kind of climb up if you were in one of the top bunks. And then, of course, when you got out of them in the morning, you had to close them back up again. So that was kind of funny for traveling. But on the Curtis, I had the same kind of sleeping quarters.
As a radio operator, what was your shift like? What was a typical shift?
It depended on where you were or what you were doing, but we had mostly the morning and evening shifts, and then the afternoon and the midnight shifts.
Did you have a typical shift, or did you rotate all the times?
I just went all the way through that sequence.
Was it like an 8-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour shift? How long would you be on duty?
The morning shift was 7 to 12, I think, and the afternoon was 12 to 5, and the evening was 5 to midnight, I guess. I don't know, that's all in there too. I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and of course it was a long time after I lived that life, so.
When you would be on duty in the Radio Shack, would you be the only person in there? Is it just one man on duty at a time?
No, but I would be the only one on a particular circuit.
And what would your duties be? To just listen for messages, or to send messages, or both?
I did both.
So say, what kind of messages would you receive and send?
Well, they were all encoded, and I got to be pretty good with the code, so I got to work on a speed key, which was horizontal. Normally, an aviation radioman who was flying had just to, hold it down for a dash and hit quickly for a dot. And the dashes and dots were all assembled into various letters. Again, as it says in there, I worked with a speed key, which was kind of unusual, but for all of our, when we sent code out, we sent encoded messages, many of which were just junk, but we didn't know that. The officers would give us this stuff to do. The idea was to keep the flow of communications normal and level and constant, so that the Japanese wouldn't understand that, big things were about to happen or something. And in terms of voice communications, which they had lots of, they actually had Navajo Indians doing, in effect, encoding.
Did you have any of the code talkers on your ship?
I think I probably did, but I don't remember them.
When you did the manual code, you used Morse code?
Yes.
But then was there a further encoding of messages?
Yeah, because you were only you were doing only 6-digit, I think, 6-digit groups, and some of it was just a bunch of junk, that had nothing to do with anybody. And we had no idea what we were copying or sending.
You didn't?
No.
Would the commanding officer of the ship give you a piece of paper, or would he actually come into the radio room and tell you what to send?
Yeah, they would give us stuff to send. Yeah.
what were some of the messages? Can you recall any? What were the kinds of messages that you would receive from other?
I had no idea because it was all encoded.
And you didn't know how did. So you would bring that to the commanding officer, and he would decode it.
Yeah.
So when you were in the Radio Shack on duty, were you pretty much busy the whole time?
Oh yeah. And in terms of the shifts, as I said, you would work the morning and the evening, and then the next day you would work the afternoon and the midnight, and go on from there. So you never knew what day of the week it was or what time it was or anything. Just weird kind of thing. I did that for a long time.
Do you recall how long? Was it like months?
Oh yeah, must have been months, yeah.
What were some of the places as you were in the Pacific? Do you recall some of the places that your ship went to?
Going out there, we went to all of the little islands that the commercial airlines used to fly to. But like I said, Honolulu was the one that I was really pleased to see, and all that sort of thing. But we eventually went to Guadalcanal and Saipan and Tinian.
Now, when you went to Guadalcanal, had they already fought the battle, or were so you came in after the battle was done?
Yeah.
What was that like? Was there any remnants of the battle?
Not really. I do remember that there were lots of, especially at Iwo Jima, there was a lot of airplanes coming and going. I wound up at Iwo Jima and then Okinawa.
When you would go to these islands, like when you got to Iwo Jima, did your ship actually anchor and stay there, and could you go on shore?
Yeah, no, we didn't go on shore. We went to Iwo Jima and anchored outside it for even before the Marines hit the beach at Iwo Jima.
Oh, so were you there for the battle?
Oh yeah. And it was kind of fun to watch. But we went there before the Marines, like I say, the Marines hit the beach, to set up a sort of a headquarters for. We always had an admiral in who headed up our group, and he was always in charge of the harbor. They called it SOPA, Senior Officer Present Afloat.
So you always had the SOPA on board the USS Curtis?
Yep.
What kind of ship was the USS Curtis? What was your purpose?
It was a seaplane tender.
A seaplane tender. So did you travel with a convoy of seaplanes and aircraft carriers, and who else was in your group?
Well, we had all kinds of ships, but the seaplane tender was essentially, it had a platform out in the back aft, as we used to say, with a crane out there, and they would dip into a sick amphibious airplane would come alongside, and we would with that crane they would lift them up and pull them up to the deck and service them, and then put them back in the water.
Wow.
So that's what a seaplane tender was like. Although that had I had nothing to do with that part of the operation. I was only in communications.
But you got to witness that and see what was going on the ship when you weren't on duty. Well, that had to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was.
When you set up as headquarters at Okinawa before the battle, did you realize that this was going to be a big operation?
Not really. We never really knew what was going on. We could watch it, but that was all. And as I say in my report there, I think at Okinawa, well, no, at Iwo Jima, we noticed the Marines hitting the beach and then eventually climbing up Mount Suribachi.
Could you see them from your ship?
Just barely. With binoculars you could.
During the battle, the radio room must have been pretty busy.
Oh yeah, the radio room was always busy. Like I say, they kept a level of traffic going through at all times.
So at Iwo Jima, you never got off the boat. Did you ever get off the boat at any islands you went to? You were basically traveling on a ship for a few years?
Yeah. Well, we got off at, like I said, at Honolulu.
Yeah.
And we got off at some other islands I don't remember. There was one place called Karamaretto that we got off that was just a gathering place for naval ships. We all left there together and drifted apart, kind of. Again, you'll see all that in there.
How long were you anchored off of Iwo Jima? Days or weeks?
Just a few days, I think. And then we went from there to Okinawa.
And what was that like? You probably got there again before the battle?
Pretty much, yeah. We had a lot of work to do in terms of servicing the amphibious airplanes, but we also apparently we served as a post office for ships as they came in and whatnot. We did a lot of that kind of work, but of course I never did any of that.
How long did you stay at Okinawa?
Well, until we got hit by the kamikaze.
Your ship was hit by a kamikaze?
Yeah.
Can you describe that to me? That had to be pretty scary.
Oh, it was.
So tell me all about that.
Well, I was in the radio shack, and we went to a condition red, as they called it, when there was an unidentified airplane around, and then they decided that was a friendly fighter, which it turned out not to be, but they decided it was that. And I was, like I say, in the radio shack looking out the hatch and watched this funny little airplane come along and turn and come in, apparently aiming for our waterline, but he wound up hitting above it, and for that reason we didn't sink. But we did abandon ship anyway.
You actually saw the airplane coming at your ship and hit? What was going through your mind?
I think that report goes into that in some detail, but I had no idea that this was a kamikaze until he banked and started flying, and he hit just below where I was sitting, actually. But he hit too high. If he had hit down at the waterline, we probably would have sunk.
What did you do immediately after he hit the ship?
I think I got up and ran back and met some of my buddies out in the back, because the radio shack was up at the front of the ship, and we went back aft to get together. But and then, as I say, we had to abandon ship eventually, but it was not an emergency at that point.
It wasn't. So was it a pretty orderly abandoning ship?
Yeah.
How did you go about something that huge?
I don't know. We just did what we were told to do, and that was it.
Did you get in life rafts or?
Yeah, I think we got into life rafts, and they took us to another ship. I had been with a thing called Fleet Air Wing 1, which had about 50 people in it. And at that time, people were being sent home 2 or 3 at a time. And I wound up in the last 3. And so after we got in that little life raft, we went to a ship that took us back for rehabilitation leave.
And actually, if I recall, it was June 18th, 1945 that the USS Curtis got hit by that kamikaze.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting near the end of the war. Did the USS Curtis end up sinking, or were they able to salvage it?
No, they were able to salvage it, and last I knew it was still in service, being used for various things. It was quite a ship.
When you got to another ship that picked you up, did you immediately get sent home for the 30-day rehabilitation leave?
Yes, yeah.
And was that 30 days in the United States?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Where were you going to go?
I came back home.
To Connecticut or California?
No, to Connecticut.
For 30 days?
Yeah.
That was probably the summer of 1945 after that happened.
Yeah.
What did you do in that 30 days you were home?
Enjoyed it.
Your brother was in the Navy at the same time. Did you ever cross paths?
No, as a matter of fact, he never left the country. He served at one of the Carolinas, I guess, as a pilot, which is I would have given my right arm to do, but I wouldn't have wanted to stay in this country all the time. I was ready to go out and win the war, you know.
Yeah. After your 30 days leave in Connecticut, where did you go?
Went back out to California to serve out the rest of my tour of duty. And that's where I did the gunnery school with Robert Stack and all of that
That's
stuff.
when you went there?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
so you had Robert Stack as an instructor after you'd already been out to the Pacific.
Oh,
and
yes.
gotten hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
how long did you stay in California? It was just really to serve out your
Yeah,
duty time?
yeah. I imagine it was probably not much more than a month or so.
And then you were discharged from there?
Yeah.
And how did you get back home to Connecticut?
Oh, probably hitchhiked on an airplane of some kind.
Do you recall where you were when you heard that the war had ended?
As I sit here right now, I don't remember, but again, that probably is in there.
Were there any casualties on your ship?
When we got hit, there were, yeah.
Do you recall numbers?
No, I don't. But there was a fair amount of casualties. Of course, we didn't know because we weren't part of the ship, really. We were just, assigned to it to run the communications part.
Jim, did you receive any medals or citations?
Probably, but I don't remember what they were.
Did you sustain any injuries while you were in the service?
No.
None, that was lucky.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm going to switch gears and ask you a couple questions about daily life.
Uh-huh.
How did you stay in touch with your family back in Connecticut when you were overseas?
That was kind of hard because you had to, you wrote your letters, but they had to be censored before they were actually put in the mail, because but my father, who understood a lot about what I was saying and doing and whatnot, could pretty much figure out where I was, even though they crossed it all out,
Who did the censoring?
They had people who were
On ship.
specializing in doing that, yeah.
Did you receive mail pretty regularly?
Mm-hmm.
How about the food? What did you eat for food?
Oh, the food was pretty good, really.
Did you have a dining hall that you had 3 meals a day?
Oh, yeah.
What about supplies, ammunition, clothing, parts for your radio? Were there shortages, or did you always have ample supply?
I always had ample supply. We got our uniform stuff in a big sea bag, as they called it, in boot camp. And that's pretty much what you carried around. You didn't go around with a suitcase or anything like that. And generally where you were, you could go into what they call a ship store, whether it was on board ship or on an island or whatever, and buy anything that you needed, to wear. What we wore were blue jeans and chambray shirts constantly. I remember when we got to Pearl Harbor, in order to get off the base, I had to buy buy uniform stuff, because they wouldn't let you out on the street with your blue jeans and your
Oh,
champagne
really?
shirt. Yeah. So I had to get a whole new uniform just to go off for several days.
Was your job as the radio man stressful?
Not really, because I was real good at it.
Did you do anything special for good luck?
No, I don't think so.
What would you do in your downtime for recreation when you weren't on duty?
Well, as I said, with those 4 shifts, you didn't really have any recreation time. I mean, you had sleeping time, and that was about it. We didn't do any recreation, except when we were on the islands. I remember on the islands, at one point, we were playing volleyball, and I came down from the net onto somebody's foot, turned an ankle, and I wound up on crutches for a couple of weeks or something.
Oh, wow.
But we were playing for $10 a man, I think, at the time, and so it was very important to play hard.
Did you ever get any leave when you were overseas? Was your only leave the 30 days when you got to come home for rehabilitation leave?
Yeah, that was all.
Jim, thinking back, can you recall any memorable experiences in addition to the kamikaze attack? Obviously, that was the most memorable.
Yeah.
Were there any other memorable experiences that you can recall?
Not really, that I can think of right now.
What's your opinion of your officers?
Oh, they were all nice guys. Robert Stack was especially nice. I remember him, he would sit and talk with us, you know. This was at a place called Lake Chabot where we took gunnery school, and he would talk to us, and I swear he could write his name with that machine gun. He was so good at that. And I remember we asked, I think again this is in there, we asked him how old Betty Grable was. And he told us I think he told us she was 32, which seemed like pretty ancient to us at the time.
Well, that must have been after the war, and you'd watch movies. It must have been kind of strange for you to see Robert Stack, who'd been your gunnery instructor in the movie theater.
Yeah, it was.
Did you stay in touch with any of your friends from the war?
Yeah, several of them. One was from Pennsylvania, and another one that I stayed in touch with was from Long Island. The one from Pennsylvania was funny, and this again is in that write-up I have. His name was Matikovic, and whenever we were assembled for one thing or another, they would call out our names and we would respond. and they never could quite pronounce his name, Matakovic. So he used to say, what did he say? One letter, one letter was silent, and again, that explains it in there. I can't remember, but
Are you still in touch with those two friends?
no, they both passed away at this point.
Did you get together at all after the war?
Oh yeah, we did.
Do you recall what your last day in service was like?
No, I don't think I do.
Was there a homecoming when you got back to Connecticut?
Just with the family.
And then what did you do in the days immediately following your discharge when you got home? In those first few days and weeks?
Well, I remember the most important thing was a GI Bill, and I took advantage of that rather quickly and went to college because that seemed easier than going to work.
Where did you go to college?
Well, I started at Hillier College, which in those days was just down in the YMCA in Hartford. And we sometimes had classes out in Bushnell Park, right across from the building. And then we went to Hudson Street to an old grammar school. And all of that eventually became University of Hartford, which, as you know, has a nice campus now and everything out of the city. But I was at the very beginnings of what is now the University of Hartford.
What did you get your degree in?
English.
What did you do after you graduated from college?
I did a lot of writing. I worked in marketing, really.
So your career was in marketing?
Yes. Which did involve a lot of writing, which I've done all my life.
Jim, how would you say your military experience influenced your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Well, I think war is pretty unfortunate, and but my experience in the military was very good. I didn't have to shoot anybody or kill anybody, and nobody shot or killed me, so I was somehow or other removed from all the brutality of war, but I think it's too bad.
Did you attend any reunions in the years that followed?
I don't think so.
Looking back now, all these years later, how would you say that your service affected your life?
Transformed it, really.
In what way?
Well, with the GI Bill, I mean, when I was in high school, only the rich kids went to college. And when I got out of the service, they were not only going to send me to college if I wanted to go, but they actually not only just paid the tuition, they paid me, I think, something like $16 a week or some crazy thing. The GI Bill was amazing, and it transformed my life. I never would have gone to college, never would have been a writer. Probably would have been a draftsman, because that's what I did before I went into the service.
Did you ever use any of your training as a radio operator again in your life?
No.
You think you could still do Morse code?
I would think I probably could, because so much of that stuff was automatic. Our communications were always in coded groups, and groups of 6 digits, I think. And so you kind of listened to the 6 letters, and then somehow or other your fingers hit the keys. I really learned to type as a result of that, and it was amazing. I think even to this day I could probably copy Morse code if I had headsets on and my hands on a keyboard.
Wow.
But some of those things never leave you.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you can recall about your military experience that we haven't talked about that you'd like to tell me about? Any other incidents or memorable stories?
Well, one of the things that impressed me about it was that I'm a Catholic, and I managed to go to Mass every Sunday, one way or another. They had a Mass. I can remember on one funny little island somewhere, I attended by putting my head in through the window outside, because it was just a tiny little church, and there were a lot of Swabbies like me there, and so we did that. I can remember going to Mass in the passageway of a ship, because there was always a Catholic priest there somewhere. They always seemed to accommodate my desires to do that. And to this day, I still go to daily Mass. But that was a Sunday thing. We never even knew when it was Sunday, because, working on the shifts that we were on. But one way or another, I would get to Mass on Sunday.
Did they always have a chaplain on board the ship?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add that we haven't covered?
No, I can't think of anything. I wish I had written my remembrances of it right after I got out of the service, rather than some years later.
Right.
And that time that I wrote that thing was even a long time ago from this date, So a lot of time has gone by. 1945 to what?
2014. Well, tomorrow it's going to be 2015.
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
So there's a lot of years involved, and
70. It's been 70 years since you were in the war.
yeah.
Well, Jim, I'd like to thank you for your service to our country, and thank you for sharing your story.
You're very welcome, dear. Very welcome.